Hi everyone, it's QuickyBaby and welcome back to World of Tanks and welcome to my tank review of the Felice. This is the hardest hitting medium tank in the game. 480 alpha damage from a 127mm caliber gun. This vehicle is going to bring a whole new level of packing a punch in a medium tank. Add to that 8 degrees of gun depression and a monster turret, which is more like a heavy from the front, and this vehicle is looking like it's going to be a bit of a daddy on a ridgeline. However, the tank does have some issues, as I'm going to be highlighting, with a horrible weak point on top, pretty mediocre armor, and stats that Wargaming seem to be buffing at the last minute to actually try and make it work. So considering this tank has such good turret armor and it has the highest alpha damage of any medium in the game, it's kind of hard to figure out exactly what to compare the Felice to. And this is also compounded by the fact that Wargaming are still currently changing the statistics right up until the day of release. Accordingly, the Felice that you see me play in the gameplay is going to be slightly different to the Felice that you will be able to earn inside the Battle Pass when the event starts on Thursday, the 7th of November. So, to be explicit, they're going to improve the aim time from 2.7 seconds to 2.5. They're going to improve the shell velocity from 1,050 on its standard rounds up to 1,200. They're improving its power to weight ratio from 13.5 to 15. Its tank traverse speed, so it'll be a little bit more snappy, and its turret traverse speed as well by 5 degrees. And they're also changing it so it has 8 degrees of gun depression all around the vehicle and not just directly over the front. So with that said and done, please take those statistics into account when we take a look at the vehicle that I'm going to choose to compare the Felice to, which is the new E77. This is a tier 9 premium German heavy tank. And I know it's bizarre I'm comparing a medium to a heavy, but when you take a look at the statistics, you might not think it's so weird. So immediately we notice the Felice packs the highest alpha damage of any medium in the game at 480. The previous maximum on a medium was 440, and this is with a 127mm caliber gun. This is great because you're going to be able to overmatch all 44mm plates, as well as also annoying 41mm plates that Wargaming try to put in to stop 122mm caliber guns from overmatching them, for example like the weak point on top of the BZ-75. Add to this that the Felice has an impressive penetration of 256 with its standard rounds, which are APCR, and great heat rounds at 310 and pretty good HE damage at 600 for 63. And this thing's firepower is looking great. That is until you think that the E75 is packing 311mm of APCR pen, which will be better apart from surfaces that are angled at more than 70 degrees, and better HE pen at 65 with 640 damage. And then it's just a debate about what is better, to have 20 alpha damage or a 2-second better reload. And I'm probably going to go with the E77 within this regard. Now onto the gun handling. These vehicles have even aim time, remember, with the 2.5 seconds buff to the Felice. But oh my word, the Felice's accuracy at 0.42 is alarming, and you're going to want to have to do everything that you can to try and make that better. However, one ace up the Felice's sleeve, so to say, is that it has 0.04 turret traverse dispersion, which means that if you improve the moving dispersion, maybe by taking smooth ride on your driver, you don't really need vert stabs on this tank when you're turning the turret to the left and the right. So as I mentioned, the vehicle has 8 degrees of gun depression. This is going to be over the sides of the vehicle and not just over the front like you're going to see me playing it. This makes the vehicle fairly flexible, but not incredibly flexible for a medium. So now onto the mobility of the Felice. It goes 45 forwards, 15 backwards, and its power to weight ratio will be 15. This means that it's going to be comparable to the E77, but just driving forwards at 5 kilometers an hour faster, with a little bit better performance on medium and soft terrain, considering the E77 has poor ground resistances there. All in all though, this is slow for a medium tank, and it isn't going to be quickly getting around the map. So now onto the armor of the Felice, and it looks like really good news here. 110 at the front of the hull, 70 at the side, 30 at the rear, and 290 on the front of the turret with 70 at the side and 40 at the rear. This means that the Felice is fantastic for just absorbing shells through its turret. Even when it's not using its gun depression, it has like 320mm of frontal turret armor. And even if your opponents are spamming gold, they still have a small chance to get through the turret. And as soon as this tank is using its 8 degrees of gun depression over the front of the vehicle, now they're going to not even be able to pen you with gold round spam. Now it does have a weak point on top, and this crown does weigh heavy on the Felice's head. And that is because it is easily hittable when it's not using its gun depression, but as soon as it is using its 8 degrees, it's a lot harder to hit. I guess the real problem with this tank is just how bad this hull armor is. 200 millimeters will easily go through the upper hull. That's not going to be bad against tier 7s and some tier 8s, but yeah, unless you're using your full gun depression, that upper hull truly does suck. The lower plate is abysmal, and the tank's side armor, it's not bad for side scraping, but it's just not great because of this wing that comes out here, which is easily hittable. The real sad thing about the Felice is as soon as you turn your turret towards the side, this becomes a definite weak point, and the side turret is just this gigantic and super easy thing to hit that even high caliber HE rounds will massacre. So add to this, having 200 less hit points than the E77, this thing definitely doesn't have the durability of a heavy tank. Now when we take a look at the miscellaneous stats, we'll see that its camo rating is very good, at least compared to a heavy. Not amazing for a medium, but far from bad. But one of the disappointing things about this tank is it only gets 380 meters view range, which means that unless you're willing to use bond vents on this tank, you will have to take coated optics for optimal scouting. So all in all, like a real enigma of a tank. It's kind of like an E77, but it's a medium. And the only true real downside compared to something like the E77 is that the E77 actually has hull armor that works quite a lot even when you're not using your gun depression, and is much, much, much better when you're side scraping. As well as that when you turn your turret towards the side, you don't have any huge glaring weak points for HE rounds, or alternatively for just lower caliber guns. Crew-wise, you'll be happy to know that the Felice has the same crew as a Progetto 65, so that crew will work well in here. Crew skills wise, I'd recommend Brothers, Repairs, Concealment, Recon and Emergency, Coordination on your commander. For the radio operator skills on your commander, take Situational Awareness, Firefighting and Jamming. For your gunner skills, I'd recommend Brothers, Repairs, Concealment, Deadeye, Designated Target and Armorer. For your driver, Brothers, Repairs, Concealment, Off-Road Driving, Engineer, and if you want a ram, take Controlled Impact if you want to bring out that Viking inside you. But for a lot of players, drop Controlled Impact and use Smooth Ride on this vehicle, as that is by far the worst dispersion value on the tank. For your loader skills, Brothers, Repairs, Concealment, Intuition to make use of those great heat rounds, ammo tuning, and Adrenaline Rush works well on this tank. But considering this vehicle doesn't have the highest of damage per minute, you might want to end up dropping Adrenaline Rush and using Safe Stowage instead, or Perfect Charge if you want to snipe on ridgelines. Equipment-wise on this tank, I'm going to have two builds. One is going to be Turbo, Vents, Gun Rammer. This is a get in position, get onto a ridgeline, use that great turret armor, use that alpha and the fairly good gun depression, and just fight it out. For my second build on this tank, I'm going to be using Vents, Vision System, and Coated Optics on this vehicle. That is to give this tank enough spotting when you're working a ridgeline which has a bush at the top. However, if you're willing to use Bond Vents on this tank, you could drop the Coated Optics and probably use an exhaust to be a little bit sneaky. But trust me, this thing is so huge, you're not going to be really making any bush plays in this tank. Field mods wise, I would recommend Module Durability Increase, improving the horrible accuracy that this tank has. Then I'd recommend taking the Concealment on this tank, unless you absolutely, utterly only want to play in close quarters combat, and then you might want to go for the reverse speed. Then I'd take the Scouting slot, so you can either be able to improve your vents, in addition to the turbo being improved, and also putting a vision system in there. And for the final field mod, this one's a bit of a head scratcher in a way. Remember, the vehicle's going to have 2.5 seconds aim time. That's definitely something you want to improve. But the vehicle hit points, you could go the other way if you really don't care about aiming that little bit extra. And for those of you sitting on the fence, just don't take the field mod. Anyway, I think that's quite enough theory crafting. Let's see what the hardest hitting medium tank in the game is capable of. Okay, so firstly, I'm going to be rolling out on Redshire, and I'm going to be using my vents with my vision system and my coated optics. Now, on my main account, if I do end up getting Bond equipment on this tank, as I said, I'll probably be dropping the coated optics for an exhaust, which will help out the tank's camo rating. Now, once again, I'd like to highlight that the statistics of this vehicle will change. So while I'm going very slowly up the slope here, when the Felice arrives, its power to weight ratio will be about 10% better than what you see here. So it will be a little bit faster up the slope, but still not incredible. So we put an HE round to start things off with against the WTF Panzer IV. Unfortunately, my camo rating not being the best without an exhaust, and I get caught by the Borask. But what you're going to be seeing in this game is the Felice in its environment. And that is starting off this battle with a meaty 1,500 damage shell there. These HE shells, they hit hard. 600 alpha damage from a medium. Look at that, 482. That is not even a high roll when you take into account shell tuning. The alpha damage on this tank will be 480 without it, and with shell tuning, it's going to be more like 486 on this vehicle when you get going. Now this thing, oh, it hits hard, but that's if you manage to hit. Remember, as I showed in the statistics, this vehicle has quite a lot of movement dispersion. Well, the build that you're seeing me here isn't using smooth ride, and I think on my main account, so to say, as long as my Progetto crew aren't screwing this tank over so hard, I will be taking smooth ride on this tank as the gun handling is poor. And unfortunately, we lost our gun there, and so we get hit by the Alpine Tiger. And suddenly things aren't looking so good for me. I wonder who it was who managed to spot me there. If it was somebody who was lurching over the ridgeline, or alternatively, if it was just one of the tanks below me. So if you think that this thing is going to have like hyper camo, because Wargaming have given it such poor view range, you can't really afford to use the exhaust, it's definitely not going to be the case. But still, for a tank that hits for 480, it's kind of like the dream to be on this ridgeline in this position with this kind of a build. But hopefully you're noticing that it's just a little slow, and you really have to like mother that reticle. And it doesn't even get any smaller than that. That's like it fully aimed. Jeez Louise, I might as well be flinging shell, like flinging rocks at them, right? Have a little catapult, probably be more accurate than what this tank feels like with regards to that. So this thing, it's definitely not a sneaky sniper, but hard-hitting, ridgeline, premium tank, makes big credits as well, because this is a premium vehicle that tier 9 is also going to make you some bonds as well. So from that regard, not too bad. And this is really just the Felice in a nutshell. It's not fast enough to play big, bold, aggressive plays like most medium tanks do. But what the vehicle does do is it just hits really hard on a ridgeline with 8 degrees of gun depression. And unlike a heavy tank, which would be getting spotted every time it went into those bushes because it's got poor camo, this vehicle simply does not. And this is it. This is the excitement of the Felice. Get on a ridgeline and hit hard. And hit harder than any other medium tank in the game, while also still having camo rating to have that flexibility. The only thing I would question is what's really different from playing this thing like this and maybe like a TL7? You know? At what point do you change a medium tank to being like a heavy tank? Whereas on the TL7, it's more of that you've taken a tank destroyer and turned it into more of an auto-loading medium kind of vehicle, right? And so, this tank, it's got an identity crisis. It really does. It's very confused. The vehicle is incredibly confused within that regard. This was a tasty 4-minute game with 5,700 combined. And honestly, in all of the games that I've played in the Felice, this is just kind of what happens when you do get on a ridgeline. This thing has a meaty turret. It doesn't have a meaty hull, as you can see here. We've definitely been turned into more like Swiss cheese within that regard. But this thing is a brute on a ridgeline. And any time that you can take a vehicle like a medium and stop it from being a scout and just make it have a big presence on a ridge, which you can do the Felice, it will have a great impact. But it's not all good news for the Felice because of this regard. You kind of end up on maps where there's no opportunity to go hull down, you know, your Himmelsdorf, your Ent, your Runeberg, and then you think, okay, am I a medium or am I a heavy? What should I do? So I had a split opinion as to what I should do here with the Felice. Should I go up north and try and just work the ridgeline at kind of like the A1 area? Should I take a vision system build just to be able to give myself the extra spotting up there? Otherwise, how am I ever going to progress the situation to be able to handle that? Should I maybe just go and like hang around at the E1 area where the Yak Tiger is and hope that the side of my turret isn't going to get absolutely annihilated by artillery? Or am I meant to go into the town and play like a heavy tank and use that 480 alpha damage to trade? And while the side armor on this tank isn't bad, as I highlighted, the frontal hull is not great. So while you can side scrape and try and look for opportunities, I just don't really handle much chance of being able to handle a BZ68 in that scenario. And now I've got a Gonkovica locking me in one alleyway and the BZ68 locking me in the other. And I kind of sit here and I think, huh. And that happened in a lot of games. It happened in a lot of games for me where I just sit and I just think, huh, I'm not a medium. I'm not fast. I've probably got poor power to weight, and even with the buff that Wargaming are planning to this power to weight, it's still not going to be great news for the vehicle. You can side scrape a little bit and just pray that they don't hit the wing on your tank, or hope that they just don't fire at your upper hull, which you will have to expose. you will have to expose a little bit of your upper hull here and all of this wing that they can be able to shoot, which is easily penetratable. And also, when you side scrape a corner like this, you have a big weak point on top that they're going to be able to shoot if they are knowledgeable. And you kind of think, what am I meant to do? When you play a tank, there's usually a great position that you can go onto at least most of the maps. For mediums. Mediums are meant to be incredibly flexible, right? It's just weird that Wargaming have created this ultra high alpha damage medium that's clearly meant to just get on a ridgeline with some great turret armor, but it just feels like it's a bit of a fish out of water in so many other areas that medium tanks are meant to be flexible in. So why not just poke? And when you get to poke, oh yeah, it's great, look at that. Oh, bam, 445 damage into the ST1. And I think this is what the Felice has to do. I think it has to just relax. I think it just has to wait for the engagements sometimes to be able to come towards it. And, oh, yeah, I guess you all thought that was actually going to go in. No. Welcome to horrible dispersion values when you're moving the hull, and also horrible bloom on that gun with regards to the tank's accuracy. You know, probably a little bit of a more of a frustrated shot there. I probably should have just been a little bit calm. And I do think I'm interested to see what this vehicle will be like when it has a 15 power to weight ratio. And with a 15 power to weight ratio, I might be able to pull off more rams, as this tank does weigh 60 tons, boys and girls. It's a heavy medium tank. And so that's why I wanted to have the controlled impact on the vehicle, because I saw it as a medium that works a ridgeline until it gets all in, and then it has to kind of like bully the enemy mediums to be able to get itself out of the situation. But I do think smooth ride instead of controlled impact is probably what I'm going to end up taking. So I don't really want to block this Type 68 here, but I just realized the position that the Type 68 in is just amazing for this vehicle. That position will allow me to only expose this big turret and to have the alpha damage, and so I'm hoping that I'm going to be covering the Type 68, but they decide to leave. Well, if they're leaving, that's fine. I wasn't exactly muscling my way in on the corner, but again, with a tank like this with just no hull armor worth mentioning, I feel like it's got to be my job to try and get into a position like this. And here, beautiful, right? Look at that. Lower plate cleansed. But now what? I don't have the DPM. I don't have the mobility. I don't really have the flexibility. What am I meant to do in this kind of a scenario? So I tell the Type 68 that I was going to help him. And I'm trying to help him, but the Gonkovica doesn't commit. And yeah, he's out of it. So while I can punish the FCM-50T before I try to scurry away, I just didn't really feel like I had that impact punch to be able to really get through that scenario. But luckily, I use a bit of a cheeky maneuver here, apart from getting caught in the side by the 432, to try and get out of a horrible scenario and hopefully end up actually having a few friends to be able to help me out. Remember, what is the speciality of this vehicle? Alpha damage, turret armor, holding a position, holding a ridgeline. That's what this vehicle has to do. And so by getting out of that town scenario, which was no longer feasible to hold against a Gonkovica, right? Who is called Poms because he's potato. Yeah. You want my potatoes? Well, you're gonna have to fight for them. Oh God, I say that, but yeah, this gun, when it hits, it hits. But it's so frustrating. It's clearly not a medium tank in that regard for how flexible you can be with your snapshots. This tank trolls. Even with its perfect turret reverse dispersion, it's that moving dispersion that's just very awkward. And I'm flanked. Progetto's got me. Luckily, Progetto misses the extra shell. Unfortunately, the artillery doesn't miss the shell. I'm going to reload an APCR round here, so I've got the shell velocity for when they manage to eventually find me. But they're actually using the bridge very well there. I'm going to have to try and shoot through the gap, or I guess I'm not, because the Scorpion's going to just launch themselves at the Progetto and save the rear of my tank. Shout out to the Scorpion there for making their way through. And we spot the FCM for the Lerva. And this is really where this tank specializes. Wow, we actually jammed the turret ring of the CS-53, so they missed that shot. I'm going to kite the Gonkovica. The Gonkovica misses the shell. The CS-53 gets finished off. Artillery manages to hit me. I use my repair kit and my med kit to be able to get away from the Gonkovica, but I don't want to overexpose my side turret now against possibly the 432 or the Lerva who'll be coming from that flank. And you can see that when it comes to just holding a position, this thing's great. It's got some armor. I've blocked 1,000 this game. We're now up to 5,000 combined. If it can just get into one of these scenarios where it just has to hold a ridgeline in, apparently missed the weak point on the corner of the BZ-68. This vehicle is very proficient. However, this replay is perfect to show you what this tank's capable of, really. The gun is frustrating. It's big. It doesn't really take artillery hits very well. And it gets outmaneuvered. And it also gets outshot. Doesn't really have the firepower to be able to cut through the situations like a lot of medium tanks do. But it's still just not bad. So you're playing the Felice. You spawn at the bottom of the hill on Westfield. What do you do? Do you go play the medium tank flank? No. No, you definitely don't. You go up on the hill, albeit very slowly, and go and fight the heavies. That's what this tank is meant to do. Take it to a heavy tank ridgeline fight, and it's bizarre, but it does. It does trade very well on those kind of tanks and those kind of scenarios. I guess the downside to the vehicle is that it just doesn't really have the speed. It's even slower than quite a lot of heavy tanks to be able to get to those positions. And I guess there's two ways of looking at it. One is that I leave my medium tank flank undergunned. Luckily, in this game, they have a Pat in the tank. And Pat in the tank might be AFK. Or might as well be AFK, right? Oh, okay, you're being a little bit harsh. Or maybe Pat in the tank is actually going to come and fight on the heavy tank flank as well. But on some maps, the Felice is poor. If you get on like a Malinovka or a Prokhorovka, I'd far rather be in any of the other medium tanks which have better view range, arguably better camo, and have the firepower that you need to be able to deal the damage rather than just like have those kind of alpha hits. However, for a map like Westfield, perfect for the Felice. We can just get into position, we can work that turret armor, work that alpha damage, and then suddenly the Felice is a powerhouse. And then this is turning the engagement into my team's favor, because now we don't have 4 heavies, we have 5 heavies, 5 including one very hard hitting heavy, right? I got the alpha damage of, I guess, the unbuffed E77, or should I say the E75, sorry. Just 10 shy of what the E75 used to have. Now the E75's got 530. I guess the issue is that while we do have great frontal turret armor, if they manage to catch us in the side like that G-Saw did, then it's not going to work out too well. And I feel that the previous battle, the way that it went, was really important to show. That the tank is good, but it just has these scenarios where I just wish I had more to be able to back up the plays that I want to make. And then this game as well, it's going to show you like the dream scenario to have this vehicle in, aka on a ridgeline sitting hull down, bouncing a T-30. Outrageous stuff, right? But it's also going to show you that the vehicle just still feels like it's not quite perfect, right? It's just not quite enough. And I think Wargaming have probably done a good job with it, because if it had a little bit more, it could have been an outrageous tank. The 8 degrees of gun depression just make it feel a little bit awkward on a ridge. I have to actually stress that, remember that the gun depression over the side, I believe, is going to be buffed. It's a little bit weaker than it should be right now with this iteration. And so I don't have 8 degrees of gun depression over the side. Remember, I only have 8 degrees of gun depression right over the front. The reason why I've turned myself to the side here is because I feel like they're trying to shoot my weak point. And I wanted to be more side-on so they couldn't be able to shoot the weak point. And you'll notice that I actually turned my tank to face the T-30 directly there to be able to get the extra gun depression. I'm pretty sure you won't have to do that, but I'm not 100% certain that Wargaming will be giving this vehicle 8 degrees over the corners of the tank, not just over the side. Alright, so the T-30 continuing to miss us. That's the play that we've got to make. Now we've got to go after this BZ-75. Hope they're going to miss us. They don't, but they hit us for 45, which allows us to get a big old shot into the T-30. And this thing, it truly feels like it's worth investing into the play to be able to get that alpha damage. 480 does feel as if you are trading well and being able to connect those shells in. The problem is that medium tanks will now shoot you multiple times for every time you shoot them, or possibly even bounce off them. So if you're thinking that you can control the engagement, sure, this vehicle will be a powerful medium tank. But as soon as the engagement is taken out of your favor, and you have an autoloader who's rushing into you, one shot might be all that you get off before you lose practically the entire tank to the enemy vehicle. Think about a TVP T50/51, for example. That thing has 1,280 damage in its magazine, and it's just going to come in and shave you off in like 4.5 seconds. And it'll be able to like run away. You're not going to reload until about 12 seconds, even with a gun rammer on this tank. Mad to think that you've got this medium that just has this awful firepower. And to have sub 2,000 DPM on a tier 10 medium, tier 9 medium in this case, it makes it just feel even worse. Luckily, you know, when you've got that thick armor, it doesn't matter if a BZ-176 is shooting you. 81 damage for his 8,000 credits? Maybe more like 7,000 credits. Be fair, QuickyBabs. It works out well for us. I'm worried about that G-Saw now, who's been slinging gold at me since the start of the game. I think they've managed to penetrate us 3 times this round, which is very unwelcome. Most of my hit points, I'm going to just try and fire a few blind shells at the G-Saw, see if we can manage to get lucky. So, all in all, the Felice. I've shown it to you in some of the great situations. I've shown it to you in awkward situations as well. I can tell you this isn't a great tank. There's no doubt it's not a great tank. However, it is a medium with 480 alpha damage and 8 degrees of gun depression and really good turret armor, so if you know the positions to play the vehicle in and you're willing to be patient, you will still do well with this tank. However, is it fun? No. It's really not fun, and I don't think with the buffs that Wargaming are going to give it that it's still going to make it very fun. The alpha damage is great, the hull armor is horrendous, the mobility is lackluster, and even though Wargaming are buffing the mobility a little bit, it's still not going to be a fast tank. The gun handling is frustrating at best, and its playstyle just feels as if there are enough heavy tanks in the game that do this, that I just really don't feel or see that a medium tank doing it is that novel. 480 alpha damage is great. It will be the highest of any medium tank in World of Tanks history. And that's brilliant, and that is the crown that the Felice wears. However, who would have thought that when that comes at the expense of so many of the other aspects of the tank, that it's just not worth it. This is just such a weird vehicle, in a way. It really is. To go in with the Vikings Battle Pass event. Firstly, it's Italian and not Swedish. What? You know, if it's going to be a Vikings Battle Pass, you'd think it would be Swedish, right? Now, I can understand that it's because we've just recently had the UDES 3.3, a Swedish auto-loading medium tank, go into the game. And Wargaming probably didn't want to release another tier 9 Swedish or medium tank so soon. And so, from that perspective, it makes sense. But it has none of the auto-loading capabilities that Italian tanks have. I really feel like Wargaming could have tried to find a different branch for this vehicle. Or maybe it's even a tank that Wargaming at one point were thinking was going to be a premium heavy, and it just ended up being too overpowered with the autoloader. I think it would have been far more fun to have an auto-reloading premium heavy tank. I wish it had less alpha, maybe just make it similar to the Progetto 66, and I think it would have been a fun tank within that regard to play. However, without that auto-reloader, I just feel like it's a medium tank in heavy tanks clothing. And while undoubtedly this turret is very troll and it's pretty good and the alpha damage slaps, I just can't really recommend this as a vehicle that everybody should get, both from being competitive but also for being fun and having fun inside World of Tanks. I think there are better tier 9 premium tanks to get your hands on. And while this vehicle isn't ever going to be bad for anyone, and you will make credits, and you will hit those big shots, and you will make the bond bonus, I just feel like it's another tank that who cares amongst the 800 different vehicles in the game. Anyway, ladies and gents, boys and girls, that was my look at the Felice and the hardest hitting tank in the game. I really hope this video is useful for you and it helps you make the decision about you want to get the tank or not. If it does, give the video a thumbs up. If you hated the video, give it a thumbs down. And let me know in the comments down below what you think about the Felice. Do you think it looks amazing? Do you think it looks lackluster? Do you think it looks awful? And are you going to be investing the time into this bonus Battle Pass chapter over the next couple of weeks to be able to get your hands on the tank? And as always, thank you so much for watching. You've been epic and hopefully I'll see you soon.